Hi everyone, welcome back to Color Me Well, and today is going to be another episode for our book club. We'll be reviewing Cal Newport's 2019 book called Digital Minimalism, Choosing a Focused Life in a Noisy World. This book really felt appropriate and timely for us, especially now during the pandemic, because we feel like we've naturally increased the amount of time that we have looking at a screen, whether it's for work or at home just watching TV or even on our own personal devices. So we hope that you find this review fairly timely because it was definitely the best timing for us too. So just a quick disclaimer, here at Color Me Well, we actually don't do book summaries. So if you're looking for a video that's going to walk you through the chapters of the book or perhaps give you a highlight of the key concepts and key materials, unfortunately, this is not the video for you, but that's okay. No hard feelings. We hope we see you in another video. For our review, Jacqueline and I will be going over our general impressions of the book, our ratings, as well as the key takeaways that we've picked up and will try to incorporate in our day-to-day lives. We might mention some details here and there, but throughout the video, we're going to try to keep the discussion as high level as we possibly can. That way we're not detracting from your own personal reading experience. One more thing I wanted to mention before we get started, we really want to stay true to the purpose of this channel, which is to talk about diversity and mental health matters. And so you're going to be seeing that perspective incorporated throughout this discussion, primarily when it comes to our rating as well as the key takeaways. We hope you enjoy this new format, and if you do, please don't forget to leave us a like. It really helps us understand what type of content you enjoy, and it really does a lot in terms of helping us continue and making this channel grow. Whew, that was a long intro. I hope I still have you, and if you're ready, let's go ahead into the book review. Hi everyone, welcome back to Color Me Well, and today's video is going to be another one for our book club. So a couple of weeks ago, Jacqueline and I released a video about social media and how it impacted our lives. And during that conversation, Jacqueline referenced a book called Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. So I wanted to quickly start, Jackie, by asking you, because I know you've read this book before we even started talking about the whole social media video. And when I asked you about the book, you were like, yes, I have a copy. Let me read it again. I wanted to get an understanding during the first time when you picked up the book, what were your expectations going into it? And what were your first impressions reading Digital Minimalism?
So when I first got introduced to this book, Denise, it was actually put on my mentor's website as part of a book list that she had. And my first impression when I first looked at the book was that it was going to be something where social media would be taken out of my life entirely. But it's because at that point I was only really discovering what minimalism was as a topic. So when I started reading the book, I found it very interesting because it really dives into social media in itself, where it came from, how it started, how it became this big thing in our world today, and then really getting into how we can slowly take it out of our lives. But it was just feeling for me like that wasn't possible at the time. So this was probably around 2, 3, maybe even 4 years ago, I want to say. And I remember at the time thinking it wasn't possible, but pre-pandemic, I was more connected to people physically than I am now. So it was just really interesting in that perspective to have that mindset. But reading it a second time around, I really felt more connected to the book. And I think it was because, I'm really starting to rethink a lot of things in my life that are, taking up a lot of space and how I can minimize that as well for myself. But yes, I really got a better impression of it this time around, I think. How about you?
Coming into reading the book, because I did hear about it from you, and I think you even mentioned it in the video that he had a very particular point of view, he had a very particular approach. I had the exact same expectation when I first digitally picked it up, and I thought it was just going to say cut off all of your digital use completely. And I was very pleasantly surprised when it it didn't seem like it was that format. And he started the book with discussing the history of social media. He talked about a couple of studies as well in the first half of the book that I thought was, hey, this is really great because it gave me that objective point of view or that objective approach to what he's writing. And I really appreciated that. What did throw me off, though, is I think somewhere midway through the book, he started giving instructions. And that wasn't something that I expected coming in. I thought he was just going to be completely theoretical about this entire topic. And I didn't realize that it was literally a how-to guide to become a digital minimalist. So that threw me off. But as I read through the book, though, I began to appreciate the approach and more and the message that he was saying. So for you, Jax, I was wondering, because you did go into it similar to me with a different expectation, at the end of reading the book, what was your overall impression?
So I guess my overall impression, and it's similar to what you were saying, Denise, it was very interesting to see this kind of step-by-step guide of how to kind of bring yourself to become a digital minimalist. And it was something that I think when I first read it, I was really kind of teetering with the thought of it. I didn't really feel sold on it, and I had to reread it again in a different time frame, in a different context of my life. Sometimes it's like we say before, when you revisit books, like you can learn a new lesson every time. And I think in this situation now, with that impression that I kind of gave before, the impression that I get this time around is that it is possible to do something like this, to go to this point where you can look at the apps that you have on your phone or on your computer and actually make decisions around how to use them and how to actually be more productive with them. But that being said, it's really interesting to see the time frame that I've realized that in, being that we're not physically connected to anybody right now. So a lot of the solutions I think that he had given in his book, I feel at this point in time wouldn't be possible. And it's just too difficult right now to be able, for any of us to be able to actually tune off and not be connected, I think, in that sort of capacity. But I could be wrong. I could be very wrong. And maybe it is possible. I know that I have some friends out there who are still doing it despite a pandemic, but that's just the time that we're living in right now, and that's the impression that I'm getting. But yeah, it's interesting how those changed over the last little while. How about you?
I definitely agree when it comes to the timing of when we're reading, or for your case, when you're rereading this book. The suggestions that he has about having physical and one-on-one time, that doesn't quite transfer during a pandemic. But overall, I still feel like I appreciated the book. I think there's a lot of lessons that I've learned and that I know I can apply in my life and continue to apply. So going from there then, I'd like to ask you, using our brand new rating scheme of 5 out of 5 for readability and 5 out of 5 for applicability, if you were to score this book on readability for you, what would your score be?
Okay, so for readability, I'm going to give it a 4 out of 5. What I really enjoyed about this book and the way that he writes about alternative activities, leisurely activities that you can do, he referenced a lot of it back to history along with different lifestyle choices. But history in particular, because it is true, life was not like this 20 something years ago. We didn't actually have social media existing. So for me, I really was drawn into that process of really trying to get in touch with a lot of those things that, I know deep down that I really enjoy, but I find at this point in my life almost like a waste of time, I guess. But he really paints this picture as, you gain a lot more from it. And I think a lot of people would really benefit from being able to get in touch with those leisurely activities that they've long forgotten about. How about you, Denise?
I also rated a 4 out of 5. I really enjoy the fact that he looked at two different studies, and the two studies looked at the impacts of social media, and he compared those studies side by side. And so the Bachelor of Science student in me really appreciated the scientific method he used in piecing those two studies apart. And I thought that he did a really good job making it as objective as possible and making me as a reader understand that uh, that he is looking at this from a third person perspective, and he's trying to approach it as methodically as possible. And yet in his writing, it doesn't feel dry. It doesn't feel methodical. It felt like I could really see myself. And to be honest, the entire time I was thinking about you, Jax, when I was reading this book, because I was thinking, how interesting would it be between in terms of what I would think versus what Jacqueline would think, because I know that we use social media a little bit differently. And the entire time I thought about both of us and how we could both benefit from reading this book for sure. So in terms of applicability then, and by applicability, I mean if anyone from a different community or a different cultural background were to pick up this book, how applicable would the messages of this book be with their life? So giving a score of out of 5, what would your rating be and why?
So in terms of applicability, Denise, I would give it a 4 out of 5. So I've observed people who are connected through social media here. I've observed it in third world countries as well. And everybody's connected in some sort of way, whether it's on a regular basis through their phones or even just going into an internet cafe to connect to someone on Facebook, or, you know, getting somebody else's cell phone and borrowing it to go on social media. We are all so connected to that world. And I think what this book really helps with and can apply to is to really look at the different apps and just get an idea of what value that brings into your life. And I think the relationship that we have with a lot of these applications are skewed because we have zero idea sometimes when we think about it what productivity it brings into our life, or if it brings any sort of meaning in that way. And I think even if you're not regularly using right now, and I do have friends who are very, very strict with their social media use and have used it in ways that can benefit them. If you're considering a new application or in considering even just venturing into social media altogether, and you're in it and you're feeling like you really need to figure it out, I feel like this book is something that you can pick up and just take a look at what it really brings to the table for those applications. And it's also just really good in terms of just looking deeper into yourself and being able to understand what else you love in your life aside from looking at your phone and scrolling for days, in my opinion. How about you?
I would agree as well, but because of those exact reasons, I actually give it a 5 out of 5 in terms of applicability. I feel I've tried to look at this book and the messages of this book from different perspective. As you said, I tried to look at it from as a Canadian in a first world nation, and I also tried to look at it as a Filipino coming from a third world country. I tried to look at it in terms of my perspective and my generation, and I tried to consider the perspectives of older generations, younger generations as well, going into this book. And truthfully and honestly, I feel like regardless of where you're coming from, as you said, we are so interconnected. The internet is so ingrained in our lives. Regardless of the demographic that you belong to, there are a lot of elements in this book that you would definitely benefit from either learning or remembering and applying in your day-to-day life. So for me, I definitely, for those reasons, 5 out of 5 in terms of applicability. So I think this was a solid book all around for both of us. And so I wanted to end this by asking, what's your takeaway? What's your main takeaway out of the Digital Minimalism book by Cal Newport?
So my main takeaway, and I really thought that this was interesting, but it's to basically schedule in time for low quality activities. So I thought that that was really interesting because I think a lot of the time we're being told to make time for the higher quality activities, which involve either reading or writing or doing something artistic or crafty, whatever that may be. That always is painted as like, oh, we have to make time for those things. But in reality, the low quality activities, I feel, do take up a lot of time. And it's starting to make me think and realize more and more how this affects my mental health in terms of sitting there and scrolling. And sometimes it'll be an hour goes by and I have scrolled through all 4 of my apps. I want to say like at least 10 times, looking at the same thing over and over again. So it's one of those things where I feel like I do want to try and schedule the low quality activities. When that'll happen, I have no idea, because right now, like I said, we are so connected. But at some point, I feel that that is important, a very important takeaway, and I want to incorporate it at some point going forward. But I really felt that that resonated with me at this time. How about you?
My main takeaway from this book is the concept of solitude deprivation. Cal Newport goes into how, as a society, we really haven't given ourselves enough time to just sit with our thoughts. And I think this is a recurring topic over and over again that you and I talk about whenever it comes to our mental health and just processing our emotions. And although he doesn't necessarily talk about this from a mental health perspective, he does go into the benefits of making sure that we have time to take a walk, be alone with our thoughts, and just process it. And I think that we tend to be very focused on scheduling more and more and more things into our time, rather than appreciating those moments of silence in our lives, because those moments of silence count and they actually have value for us if we let them be. So there you have it. That's mine and Jacqueline's ratings for Digital Minimalism by Cal Newport. We hope you enjoyed this review, and we're really curious, have you read this book yourself? What are your key takeaways? We really want to know in the comments. And please don't forget to leave us a like and subscribe, and we hope we see you in our next video.